You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to POP, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. Additionally, in today's episode, we had a couple of issues with the microphones on our end. But our guest Matt sounds great, so please enjoy what he has to say. Thank you.
You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. I am artist and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm game designer Branson Faustini, and together we get to ask questions to the people who made the world of fun.
And speaking of the world of fun, over the last 30 years, actually, he came in, I guess, a little bit later, but Matt Nuccio from New York, thank you for joining us. Really happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks, guys. I mean, it's a complete honor. I mean, you're doing a wonderful job with this podcast, and I'm excited to be on it.
Excited to have you. And just as a little bit of background for listeners or viewers out there, Matt is a toy designer, package designer. He is the president of Design Edge out of New York. It's been a family business. And you've been there, I suppose, for since you were a kid, because you were, I guess, taking over the family business. You've been working on products kind of across the board, from collectibles to toys, games, everything.
Yeah, you had to have made a lot of products.
That is, yes, I've definitely forgotten so many products over the years that we've every year, we must work on 1,000 products a year, and that's not even I don't even think that's an overstatement. And the breadth of what we do and the amount of stuff that comes through the door, whether it be from product design to manufacturing to just package design. And as you guys know, being in the industry, not everything makes it to market. So, you can do 30 items for one company, and we handle, dozens of companies at any given time. So, yeah, it's these eyes have seen too much.
So, one of the common threads that we've seen with a lot of the toy designers, toy inventors, developers, is they never grew out of their childhood. But you're kind of a special case, I guess, in more ways than one. You started becoming or working as a toy designer when you were like 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What was that like?
Well, actually, I started in the toy industry even earlier than that. So, as the story goes, my father started the toy industry in 1969, working with Ideal Toys and then Aurora. Then he got drafted and moved over to HG Toys, where he ran the art department, and eventually then the marketing department, and then oversaw production. Back in the day when everything was done domestically. And if you're not familiar with HG Toy, they were the king of role play, and heavily licensed. So any it was Dukes of Hazzard and Chips and all these fantastic different, you name it, Happy Days, any type of 70s, sitcom that existed. HG had the licensing for that. So he was running that company. And my first real toy jobs when I was in about first or second grade was packaging models. So you can find me on the old Dukes of Hazzard packages, and I think I'm a phone man on one set, like it's a role play phone man, like a lineman set. It's so 80s. It's fantastic. But yeah, from there, and fast forward a few years later to about 1987, my HG Toys was sold to a company called Superior Toys in Chicago. My father didn't want to go, so he decided to just for him and my mother to start the Design Edge out of the family garage. My mother was an art teacher and an illustrator, and as I say, I was drafted from day one. So there was all hands on deck. The family had to stay afloat.
Well, I got the chance to see you and your dad together, and he's sort of just like an older version of you in some ways.
Yeah. It's like watching an old episode of The Sopranos, right? Just like two New York guys arguing and lots of hands moving around, and it was like the whole time. Yeah.
So what's that like working with him on stuff like that, kind of father-son sort of deal? It had to come with some fun dynamics.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of respect for my father, and he definitely was very encouraging. And while he does have has a reputation of being a bit of a tough guy, he's also pretty soft. He also comes from a different era in the toy industry. When I first got in, it was still the old school, like as I like to say, like cigar chomping, toy guys that were, just really just merchants, just like dealing and stuff. And, they didn't care. They could care less. It was, pre-corporate toys, and my father just handled them well. Like, he wouldn't allow himself to get bullied. And at the same time, like, he just made sure that he was assertive and that, when they came to him to do stuff, that he did it right. He did it 100%. And, and he wouldn't even let the clients let us cut corners. I mean, that's just the way I grew up. And it was an amazing education. In fact, by the time I got to art school, I feel like I wasted 4 years of school, like trying to learn design that I had already acquired, 10 years prior. So I got to hang out and smoke cigarettes at the bike rack a lot and get good grades.
Not that we condone that, but that is some. It's definitely
bike racks are okay, cigarettes are not.
Yeah, as a kid though, you're not exactly going and playing with toys that exist. Like, you have a different childhood experience of playing in general.
Yeah, there was a lot of interesting things that went on in my childhood. Some key things. I remember sitting down in the conference room at HG Toys and them throwing in a VHS cassette and be like, watch this and let us take some notes and let us know what you think. And I watched this entire hour animation of stuff, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I was like, you guys have to do this. And I went to school, I told all my friends about it, and they all were convinced I was making it up and that it was a lie and that there was no such show. And of course, like a year, maybe even more went by before actually it appeared. And that was Thundercats. I still remember watching the pilot of Thundercats like a good year and a half before anyone even knew it existed. Also, He-Man figures. HG had gotten the licensing for He-Man. So I got all these He-Man figures before they even came about. Also, again, prototypes, things that never got released. I wish I had them. I don't anymore.
It'd be worth a ton now.
Yeah. And there was just like a ton of that. It was also, I told HG not to sign Willow. I remember that. I didn't quite know who George Lucas was at the time. I think I was still a kid. And I watched it. I was like, it seems like a ripoff of Star Wars.
It's one of the most underrated movies now.
Yeah, I like it a lot more now. But actually, I did them a lot of. I did some justice because it was a tank of a licensing program. So.
I heard a rumor that you were behind the ninja craze.
Well, yeah. Well, so the old toy guys, a lot of them still call me the Ninja Kid, even though I'm in my mid-40s now. But yeah, I mean, I was an early identifier of ninja properties. So basically, in New York, we used to have the local channels that on the weekends would play, all the Kung Fu theater stuff, and you'd watch all these, overdubbed shows, the classic, like all that sort of stuff, and there was every now and then there'd be ninjas, and I just thought they were the coolest things. So I went and I sculpted a little ninja, and I brought it to my father, and I was like, you guys should make ninja figures, and you guys should make ninja swords and all, throwing stars and nunchucks, and my father thought it was a good idea. He drew it up much tighter, brought in my action figure, took it to the board at HG. They liked it. They started developing stuff. They started showing it at a toy fair, and it blew up like tremendously to the point where CBS, as in the TV channel, used to acquire a lot of toy companies back in the 80s, got heavily involved. And at the time, one of the big execs there is a guy by the name of David Burko. He remembers clearly my father pitching it and telling everybody it was his son's idea. So David runs around to this day telling people that I identified ninja a good 5 years before
the original
anyone else created a category. No royalties, biggest success of my life. No, not a single dime.
Yeah. Wax on, wax off. So with because you've got a couple of kids now, correct?
Yes, that I know of.
You know, and how old are they?
My oldest is about to be, on Friday, he will be turning 14. And my youngest son is 11.
And so are they going to end up joining into the family business? Is that how it works?
Well, they already, like I was, were somewhat drafted. You know, this summer I had them move bookshelves around so that we could reposition some stuff at the office. And I will sit them down and let them draw ideas and try to teach them some basic skills because, you know, there's a lot of hand skills to designing stuff. And both my sons have very active imaginations. And I try to encourage that as much as possible. But I do tell my son, my oldest son, I'm like, you know, don't go to design school, you know, become an IP lawyer. You know, I can teach you the rest.
Get those skills that are kind of not up for debate. Some of the framework stuff that then you can like overlap any creative lifestyle, any creative thinking or thought process over. But an IP lawyer having that basis would be a good way to enter this industry.
Yeah, you know, he's a strong tinkerer, and I think that's a key to a good toy inventor. You know, as far as product design goes, there's some engineering in there and whatnot. He might have to get a minor in engineering. You know, light schooling. You know, low degree with a minor in engineering. No pressure, son.
Yeah, to become a toy inventor.
Yeah, exactly.
Over the years, there have been a lot of changes in the toy and game industry. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen?
Oh, yeah, it's been tremendous. I mean, I sort of hinted at a little bit before when I started talking about, like, you know, the old cigar chomping, you know, toy guys. Because, you know, when I first got in, the toy industry was you know, a lot more small or medium companies that, you know, and there was a lot more retailers. So, you know, all these guys had a little piece of the pie, and you'd show up at their office and they'd have like a bottle of scotch in their desk and, like, you know, and cigarettes burning in the ashtray, and, you know, and you know, Toy Fair was 2 weeks, if not longer sometimes, and everyone was in the toy building. And I would, in like early high school, I would just, you know, take the train down into Manhattan and then just go straight to the toy building to pick up samples, and, you know, from all these guys. And, you know, it was crazier. There's a lot more dangerous stuff going on. I remember, you know, just like smoke in the air and people smelling like booze in the middle of the day. And it was, you know, I could even notice that as a kid, you know. And I remember being in the toy building elevators with people smoking. Like, that's crazy, you know. But just the mentality was different. It was just like, you know, what can we make? How can we sell it in? You know, people weren't. They were just, you know, it still is, but it was very much a fashion business at that point. They were just trying to get in this year's line, get it to retail, see how it does, and then on to next year's line. You know, but it wasn't as calculated as this now. You know, now there's a lot of marketing, there's a lot of data, you know, and then the industry is really controlled by 3 or 4 major players, you know.
Can you touch on that a little bit more, like what you mean by a fashion-based industry? Because I realize that those trends are just cycling so fast, like, and rarely have I heard the toy industry compared with the fashion industry, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a history too. You know, if you really, you know, you think about where the toy building is, you know, or was really, and for those who don't know, it was 200 Fifth Avenue on the corner of 23rd Street in Manhattan. So, only a few blocks up was the fashion district. And those worlds often collided and worked together, you know, and then many toy companies actually had lines of apparel as well. So they were designing things in the same sense that the fashion industry was, so that it would be sort of useless a year or two later from the onset, so that you would want the next big thing. And then by the time the 80s came around, just as in fashion, it really exploded, right? They started making the hottest toy of the year. You really didn't hear about that in the 60s and 70s. But by the 80s, you had Cabbage Patch, and, you know, and every year someone was trying to make the next Cabbage Patch and grow the next big thing. But those items 2 years later were always gone. And it hit its height by the 90s. You know, I think the last really true massive item like that was Tickle Me Elmo, which I worked on, which was crazy. It was 19 years old, and I just was stuck sitting there doing marker renderings of stuff for Toy Fair for Tickle Me Elmo.
It's crazy just trying to keep up with the trends and the idea of design, obsolescence to where you've got to make the thing that's new and exciting every year. However, there are those evergreens that pop up that have the ability to stay, and sometimes they're, I guess, rebranding them or repackaging them, putting new licenses on them.
Well, absolutely. And every toy inventor that we all hang out in the same crowds. If you after a good people will play event and we all end up in the bar, everybody sitting in that room is basically just chasing the dragon, right? They're all trying to the only toy inventors you meet who do it professionally are the ones who had success earlier in their career, because you can't sustain otherwise. Yeah.
So when it comes to some of the other changes that you've seen over time, because you've referenced tobacco and the smoke a lot of times, but the cigar chompers, I'm getting like this picture, like this Mad Men of toys kind of.
No, nowhere near as good looking. These guys had like bushy mustaches, and they're all tobacco stained, like ill kept. Yeah.
But today there's a lot more gateways, and you're seeing a little bit different crowd. What are you seeing today for the game inventor, the toy inventor, as far as points of entry?
Well, it's a lot easier to become to get into the industry. I mean, the doors are open. People are even aware of it. I don't think people were really aware that it was something you could do, even 10 years ago. Now I've seen, because of the internet, I'm always getting contacted by budding toy inventors that have an idea and want to go to the next level. And People Play is a great place for them to sort of go and to learn about the industry and to go to the events and possibly break in. But years ago, toy inventors were primarily guys who had worked at a large toy company and had gone independent. And really, you were not so much like Eureka, I've got an idea company. You were pretty much just an independent toy development company, and you would then sell off your items before manufacturing them, which is a very strong model and still actually exists. And if you look at the more successful toy inventing groups, that's essentially what they are.
And I guess you mentioned People of Play and going. Are there, so I guess for listeners out there are different conferences and events that go on, like one in Chicago, the Shy Tag People of Play, and you sit down and you get to then pitch your ideas to the Game Scouts or inventor relations people. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of like the grind that you and I live, as far as let's put this pitch together, let's put it out there, let's get rejected. You want to tell us a little bit about your experience and maybe some best practices for people trying to get their ideas out there? Like, what are some things that they should maybe shoot for or alternatively not do?
Well, especially early on, you have to learn how to listen, right? And take the feedback and not always apply it, but at least weigh it, see what the value of it is. You can't be, I've run into too many guys that are confrontational. You also, if you want to be a professional toy inventor, you have to be prolific. The one or two ideas, if I stopped at one or two ideas, I'd be gone. I'm hoping to have at least one or two a day, let alone like one or two a year, and hoping that someone's going to take to them. And stick-to-itiveness, it's something you have to really want it, and you have to like the lifestyle, and it's grinding. I'm on, pre-COVID, I was on the road a lot, twice a month, and all over the world. As you know, the toy industry is a global industry. I could be in Japan one day and a week later be in Germany, and then Los Angeles, then Chicago, and then Dallas, and then Hong Kong, then Guangzhou, and it was just in a way grueling and in a way invigorating. But you have to like that. It's I always call it like it's a quasi rock star sort of thing, except for there's not as much money and girls aren't flocking to you as you exit your hotel. But other than that, it's really, really, really satisfying.
There's something fun about walking into like Target or Walmart and seeing or even better, walking to somebody's house and there's one of your products there. Like, hey, have you seen this? In fact, I have.
Yeah, well, there's the flip side to that too, though. I've also, having two sons, I've been at birthday parties when people buy my kids something, and I'm like, really, that guy owes me a lot of money. But I know, absolutely. I take pleasure in the fact that when I walk into a Walmart or a Target or an independent toy store, I'm without fail so far. The day will come when this won't be true, but so far, I've yet to walk into a store where there's not something we worked on in some capacity.
And you've really made it when you walk into the thrift store and you go to the game section and you find one of your toys or games in the
Right, yeah, that's always the best. It also makes you feel horrible at the same time. You're like, oh, it's been that long. But you know what I did with games? It's one thing because you're looking and you're like, oh wow, they're giving it away for $1. But on the flip side, though, like when we do action figures and stuff, there's some figures I'm like, oh, I should have taken a case back of that because they're all worth like $600, $800, in some case $4,000. We've worked on some action figures that just like go through the roof. I mean, they become commodities.
Yeah, if you could only have hung on to the original casting of that, the original prototype run.
Yeah, and then I do have a collection of prototypes and first mold shots of quite a lot of action figures we've worked on, and some interesting stuff. I don't know if you can see over here. There's that's a She-Hulk package that they accidentally put a Spider-Man in, which.
So with package design, because you're doing tons of kind of from original idea all the way to the shelf kind of support. With the package design, are you seeing certain things that are kind of shifting with today's model?
Yes. I love packaging, and we do a ton of it, and we do it every day, day in and day out. And we do it for many industries, and I often joke because it's true, but our clients range from Hasbro to Hooters, and because we handle all the stuff from Hanes to Canon, we do a lot of non-toy packaging as well as a lot of toy stuff. And the dynamic of rather what's required of a package has changed significantly in the last few years, but not necessarily the way that people think. So a lot of people immediately come to me and they go, well, we can just, make the box simple because we're just going to throw it on Amazon. Yeah. Well, then but that doesn't work like that because for several reasons when it comes to toys. Yes, you might want to shrink the footprint. You might want to reduce the amount of materials. Obviously we want to get rid of, as you're very well aware of, we want to get rid of the plastic as much as possible, if not completely. But the package is still your front line of defense. It tells a story. It invigorates. It attracts. And that doesn't make a difference if that package is being shown online or if it's being shown at retail. But there are differences to ways that those need to be marketed because, the online type of package really has to, it can be studied a bit more while retail package cannot. So you can get away with a little bit more online than you can at retail. The online style of packaging is actually more similar to specialty because at a specialty toy store, generally, the owner or the proprietor of that shop will lead somebody or introduce somebody to a toy, which is the beauty of specialty. This is why I love Astra. If you're not familiar with Astra, it's the American Specialty Toy Retail Association. They have their own show every year. The Astra crowd is great. Like they'll pull something out, they'll highlight it, they'll demo it, but they like their packaging to be more like a book jacket, very pretty, something that you could stare at, something you're going to want to keep out, which, especially since you guys are big on games, has really become a trend in games, right? Games have become more, less in the closet, more on the shelf, right?
Yeah, everybody's got their shelfie.
Right. Yeah, and the footprint shrunk. But I mean, those are the main things. Obviously, your material changes, the style of packaging. I mean, currently, all things are styles and fashions are secular. We're seeing a lot of neons again, which is fun. I always find that it's the best place the best world for neon is toys, for sure. I can't think of another industry that benefits. Because otherwise, if you show me a lot of neons, I just start thinking of girls skiing in the 1980s.
I had a neon jacket in the 1980s for skiing. I think it was hot pink, if I recall.
Yeah, we all do. We're about the same age. Trust me. There's plenty of pictures of me in hot pink.
So what about people publishing their own games? That has become a much, much more viable thing in the last 10 years or so, especially with Kickstarter.
Yeah, it's not just games. It's growing across the board. It's toys. It's games. It's plush. It's everything. It's the entry to market is so much easier than it once was, because you can now go onto Amazon or Walmart.com or build a Shopify site and sell it yourself. If you have any savvy in marketing and you have a way of getting it out there, or you've got a good enough product that might be able to just take on its own, you stand a chance of making some money and building a company on your own without having to go to retail. Because only a few years ago, if you wanted to get a game or a toy to market on your own, it was next to impossible. You didn't have vendor numbers, and if you don't know what the vendor numbers are, those are that's your contract with whatever retail you're working with, be it Target or Walmart or CVS or whomever it is. And without those buyer numbers, you have nothing. So you would have to license it to a company that had that, so that they could then sell it in. And that's why you see like rapid growth of toy companies, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, because before the internet was exploding, they were running around buying smaller toy companies, not necessarily for their product lines, but for their vendor numbers. So it's crazy, but now it's not as important. In fact, if you have a successful item online, odds are the buyer's going to seek you out to see if they can get it into their retail. So it's completely different than it once was.
I guess it becomes like a choice between like that inventor, that game designer, toy inventor has got to make that choice of, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want to now have my company, or do I want to go ahead and pass this off and give it to somebody else? They're going to make what it is they make out of it, and I might get my few percent out of it, and they might sell 100,000 units or 500,000 units, or I'm going to go ahead and try to do this myself, and I might sell 20,000 units, but I'm going to make 20 times more per item.
Yeah, I mean, it's
math problem.
I mean, you've nailed it. I've watched people. I've been in both sides of the meetings when I'm sitting with a toy company that I work with, and they're trying to talk an inventor into licensing it to them, and they start to, do you want to own a forklift? Do you want to get phone calls at 3:00 in the morning? They try to scare them into all that, but. Truth is, if you're making a 10 by 10 game and you're ordering 5,000 pieces, you don't need to buy a forklift. You can work your way around that. But then what it really comes down to is, do you have the wherewithal to operate your own business? Because and the best analogy I can give is, you can't open a restaurant when you feel like it. You'll never stay in business. You have to be there when you're needed, and you have to deliver, and you have to get everyone excited, and you have to keep the menu fresh, right? So if you want to start a toy company, by all means, it's the best time to do it. And to your point, if you license something and you're getting 5% net gross, after all their expenditures, and they make 100,000 units, you probably would make more as an independent game inventor if you were able to make full margin on producing 5,000 units on your own.
Yeah, it's about that break-even point right there.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to that lifestyle choice. I wake up every day and I'm excited to go work on toys and games. It's like something that's fun to do.
Yeah.
And I know you are passionate about what it is you're working on day in, day out. Maybe not every day. Like there's still the sucky things of just sometimes work by definition is work, but
Yeah. Well, I think it's also good. I think every inventor at some point should probably try to launch something just for the experience and the understanding of how complicated it can be on the other side too, though, because oftentimes when a product fails, it's everybody's fault but the inventors, and they don't realize truly what goes into it. So I think that's a major education too.
Yeah. It's the truncation and the removal of the distribution, the wholesale with the internet has allowed that direct-to-consumer model, definitely opening it up. But there is that appeal for the inventor of like, I'm going to go ahead and sign this off while it's still just a 8.5 and 11 by sheet of paper, and here's the idea. That's as far as I'm taking it, and I'm going to go on and keep my day job.
Good luck with that. You're probably, if you do the math at the end of the day, you'd be like, I calculated how many reams of paper I bought over my lifetime, and it would have been cheap. My own.
Yeah, the failure rate is definitely something. How do you deal with that rejection? Because I know as a game designer and inventor, where I'm sure your heart gets really attached to certain ideas. We're like, why don't they just go with this one? Like, just get rejected on a daily basis in the midst of these wins.
Yeah, you just do. You just have to have thick skin. I realize that the odds of it getting to market and being successful is very difficult on its own right. And I often use, the music business as a great comparison because there's so many talented people out there and there's so many great singers and songwriters, but, very few actually make it to market, right? And, I guess a secret part of me hopes that someday someone's going to find my stash of toy ideas and be like, oh my God, he was the real true genius of the 21st century toy. But that's just a fantasy as I drive.
Put it on the shelf right next to Da Vinci's journal.
Right, yeah. It is a roller coaster, right? Because you're like, hey, we're interested. You're like, yeah. And then they're like, well, then 2 days later, like so-and-so in marketing thinks that it's not really viable. And then you're like, and then, or you get past that front gate and it gets in there. And then all of a sudden it's like, you think you got this big hit, but then the costing doesn't work out, right? Or costing doesn't work. Even worse, the costing doesn't work out, but they cost reduce it to this point where it's not even recognizable of what you did, nor is it a good product anymore. So you're almost embarrassed of it, right? That happens. But every now and then though, something just flies through that's pretty much the same exact thing that you created, and sometimes those are successes and sometimes those are failures. So I guess you just have to be a glutton for punishment. Really, it's gonna be ups and downs, and that's probably why there's so many manic people in the toy industry. It's just it just works for that personality.
That's also probably why a lot of people in the toy industry wear multiple hats. See, you work on your own stuff as well as other people's at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you're wearing both as a consultant and an inventor through your line of work.
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of top toy companies. In fact, I love working with other companies. It's really get my best education and where I'm able to apply it, and as being an outsourced studio too for so many companies, we have this major advantage of seeing trends as they're happening. We just all of a sudden realize everybody's asking for this color, or everyone's citing this reference, or everyone but every single one of them thinks they're the only one doing
it. Everybody's original together.
Yes. Herd originality.
Yeah. But you've had a couple of nice wins. These kind of keep you going. I know you had Color Smash in Walmart, which was one of the top selling games. Is that correct?
Yeah. It was a top seller at Walmart. That is true.
And then Storytime Theater was also nominated for a Toy of the Year. Those have got to just really kind of keep you going.
Yeah. That's always exciting. At this point, we've been nominated for Toady 4 times. Have not won, but it is an honor just to be nominated, right? In fact, I actually kind of believe that because a lot of the press building up to it is after you win it, like, everyone's like, guess who won? And then it's like out of the news. Right?
Lego.
Right, exactly. Disney, blah, blah, blah. Right? It's like,
Baby Yoda.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it is an honor. And the same thing with the Taggies, and I'm not sure when this is airing, but we just, we got nominated for some Taggies this year too. Excited about that. But yeah, like those are great items. And then you're talking about vastly different items. So you've got, a Color Smash, which is like a $9.99 or $12.99, depending on which version you get it, because there's multiple versions. Card game, and then the Storytime Theater, which was like an $80 retail.
That's a good diversification. Yeah. Do you have some other games, toys that kind of stand out to you that just come with some good fun stories, some good adventure, trying to get those out there?
Well, I mean, over the years we've worked on so many things, and it's like, and then there's so many celebrities too. There's always like crazy celebrity stories, and that's why another reason why I feel like toys is this quasi rock, because the only time I can't imagine me working anywhere else where like I could sit down and like and a celebrity is like chewing my ear off about what I do, and I want to like turn around and ask them what they do, and and over the years it's been some like interesting. I've been cursed out by Michael Madsen, had a screaming match with Paula Abdul, had a bunch of drinks with Daryl Hannah, broke Kevin Bacon's cactus in half. It's just like all these like crazy. He's like crazy.
Done that. Yeah. Didn't you also work on some Texas Hold'em?
Oh yeah, well, Texas Hold'em. That was so. Yeah, so Joel Berger, who was the Cardinal family, before it was sold to Jim Master, we did a lot of packaging for them, and we had actually licensed them a few games over the years too. That did fairly well. I mean, they had great distribution. So, but that's a whole other story. But he called me into his office one day. He's like, my high school son's playing poker with all his friends. I think we should do some poker sets. And he's like, and they're playing Texas Hold'em style. And none of the TV shows had come out yet. There was nothing out yet. So we did this like funky tin-shaped Texas Hold'em set for Cardinal, and it just like blew off the shelves like super fast. In fact, that was nominated for a Toady as well, that year. And then that one set turned into like countless sets. We were doing so much Texas Hold'em stuff. I mean, that year we did, I can't even tell you how many different packages and variations. And then the following year, it really blew up. And now we're dealing with like all licensing of like, this Texas Hold'em TV show and that Texas Hold'em TV show. And it was just all stemmed. I mean, I really feel like Cardinal like really made Texas Hold'em into a household name by making it like something you could buy at retail. And that company, although it had been around at that point for 60 years, was doing okay, but they went from doing okay to doing amazing based on that. And that was quite a ride. That was one of the first times I watched, a phenomenon of that level. And I've been involved in some pretty crazy products over the years. Like I mentioned, Texas Hold'em, and Pogs. Pogs was crazy too. I was when was the Pogs hit? Like 96, right? So again, I'm in my very early 20s, and we didn't have dies to cut those circles out. So I would have to make samples all day long with an X-Acto knife and just cutting through chipboard. And I'd go home and not be able to bend my finger. I was like E.T. Like I was just like cutting chipboard out. In fact, Michael Albert, whose family, was the ones that launched that product back in the day, I often remind him of that and make him buy me drinks.
It's not easy to cut a circle with an X-Acto knife.
No, I definitely got a good education. And oddly enough, last night somebody handed me an X-Acto knife. He's like, you know how to use one of these? I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to use one of those.
I heard you worked on a Godfather game and did a bit of research.
Oh yeah, that was a hole, right? So that was a good friend of mine, Andrew Camdy, was working with Paramount and Nickelodeon at the time, and they had, oddly enough, the Godfather had fallen into their plate and they didn't know what to do with it. So he came to me initially to see if I can get action figures made, only to quickly find out that they weren't going to get any likenesses. So that was out the window. So I was like, we'll do a game, a trivia game. So I called my friends up at Endless Games. They thought it was great. They did a licensing deal. And then they commissioned me to write the game, which I did with Brian Turtle from Endless Games. Like, he joined me. We came over, we got a bottle of Chianti, we watched the movie a bunch of times, and we had to rewatch it because we drank too much wine. But, that's just the way those things go. But then going through that, I was, sort of just like telling Brian that there's a bit of, mob history in my family that all, predates me and really predates my parents, but I know that it existed. So, like, after we were done with the game, I just started doing more and more research, and then I found out it wasn't just like a little bit, it was like a lot. It was like well documented. And there's when my great-great-grandfather, Giovanni Zarcone, was arrested in like 1901, he made the cover of the New York Times magazine. And the opening statement was, and I love this because it's the Times, in another example of how the Italian community is destroying the United States. But in their defense, he was a hitman, and he was arrested with, like moving bodies from one part of East New York to another in barrels to dump them in the East River.
Well, I'm thankful that you're redeeming the family name through play.
Yes. See, that's the thing in the Godfather trilogy. There's only 2 generations, and they never completely go legit. The problem is they push too fast. You got to wait at least 4 generations for the family to completely go legit. That's the way it goes.
Well, Matt, this has been just killer. Kind of diving through the story, hearing everything from I guess the original Ninja Boy all the way through the Godfather. Just epic. But before we go, there's one thing we wanted to do is just race through a couple of hidden roll questions. What we've got here is a die, and these are just going to be a couple of rapid fire first thing that comes to mind, and we'll just kind of see what rolls.
Sure.
All right, so we got the star. That is your kind of go-to toy or game right now. Like, if you're just going to go get something and actually play with it.
One Night Werewolf.
One Night Werewolf. Epic.
Yeah, I play that with my boys. We have a good time.
That's a good one. All right, Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt is what genre do you think there is just never enough of, or there is not enough of now for a toy and game?
What genre is there not enough of? Role play. I feel like there should be a lot more role play things. It really encourages imagination, and like sort of gets overlooked and forced into the Halloween section when it really needs to be back in the toy section.
That's good. Yeah. Especially as a parent, you want to foster as much creativity as you can.
Yeah.
Get kids away from just totally being immersed into an iPad these days. To have a little bit of their own imagination. That's good.
It should be out there.
All right, and final one, the broken heart. What genre do you just love to hate?
What genre do I love to hate? Oh, geez, there's so many, but some of them are my clients.
I'm going to insult somebody here.
I might have to take a hard pass on that one. Do you want to roll that, or I'll just pick something that's completely antiquated, vegetable play? I don't know,
It's fair. You can just love it all. We know you do.
Yes, I do. I love it all. It's all good.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it. It was a blast.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way you can support us is to share us with your favorite brains. Please thumbs up, leave a review, and follow Hidden Roll Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com for a monthly sneak peek at our upcoming content. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Our episodes are available on all major listening platforms, or if you'd like to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, send us an inquiry at hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. Or let us know on our social media. We love to hear your feedback and ideas. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.